Patrick Dennis with you. Welcome to another edition of what we like to call the Barksdale Bubble there, folks. And there's a reason why we call it that as well with it. And obviously, each guest we have, we will chat with them if they actually know anything about the Barksdale Bubble or not. Joining us this week is somebody I've been meaning to get on one of our podcasts here. It is Mr. Jay Grymes. He is actually somebody, if you've been down in the Baton Rouge area over the past, I'm thinking maybe 25, 30 years or so, you may have had a chance to see him on television, but he's not doing that anymore. So, Jay, welcome very much here to the Barksdale Bubble there. I guess first question for you before I ask you questions about yourself. Have you ever heard of the Barksdale Bubble?
Only just about 10 seconds ago.
So the Barksdale Bubble, just so you know, I don't want to use the word conspiracy theory, but people up here really want to buy into the fact that Barksdale Air Force Base, if you might have heard of Barksdale Air Force Base, home of B-52s, that they can influence the weather, meaning they have a button out there that they push to activate the Barksdale Bubble to divert thunderstorms moving into areas around Barksdale Air Force Base. And so my first question is for you, and I'm not asking, we do not dive into too many things because you know in your job now and your job in the past, talking about little words like climate can be a little dicey sometimes with it. So we're not getting in that there with it, but I've had chats with my friends, the Weather Service, is that my conclusion is this: Barksdale Air Force Base might influence temperatures because of all the concrete, but that's probably where it stands after that, I would imagine.
I'm going to go with that. And the other thing is, since the air base is on the east side of the concentrated city, you've got a large, basically concrete oven that everything, for the most part, moves from west to east across the city towards the airport. So if you combine those two large features, yeah, you're going to create some microclimate changes that could, in
Yeah,
fact, have some impact on the local weather.
it could. It could. It's the same concept as if you go look at our current temperatures right now on this very day. I guarantee you, Shreveport Regional Airport's going to be about 3 or 4 degrees warmer versus everybody else around them. Why? It's because of the concrete that happens to go and end up being there with it. But let's talk about Jay Grymes a little bit. So, Jay Grymes, you are somebody that has spent, I think, your entire career in Baton Rouge. Am I right about that or not?
That's right. I came to Baton Rouge in '85. LSU brought me down here. I was a full-time student for 1 year, and after a year, the university offered me a full-time job, and I have been doing weather and climate in Louisiana ever since.
Wow. So you've been doing that. What year was that again?
Well, I got here in '85 and started full-time work at LSU in '86. In '91, I became the state climatologist. So I was the state climatologist from '91 to 2003. And during that period, I started dabbling in your profession. I started doing a little weekend work and a little bit of weekend work in television for the CBS affiliate in Baton Rouge. Suddenly became every weekend, and 2 years became five, and then it was seven. And at the end of the 7 years, they did the unthinkable. They offered the part-time guy the first chair.
Mm.
And so in '03, I became the chief meteorologist for the CBS affiliate. So all during that time, I was double dipping LSU and television. I did 5 more years in both places. And then in '08, I officially retired from LSU and maintained my full-time position as the chief at WAFB up until last August. And then last year, the state reached out, actually the governor's office, Governor Landry reached out and asked me to come to work for GOSEP, the governor's office, Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. And at the same time, coincidentally, not related, just purely happenstance, LSU reached out and asked me if I'd be interested in returning again for a part-time position. So after 28 years in TV, I come back full circle and now working for the state and also back at LSU.
So you've now been doing this. You're back to doing the state climatology work. How different is that from doing broadcast television to going and taking on that role as a state climatologist?
Oh, it's very different. I mean, think about your position. Your position is really about the focus of your position is getting people ready for tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. So you're focused on tomorrow and the next couple of days. Now, sure, you might look out 7 or even 10 days to give people guidelines there, but your real focus point is number one, the next 24 to 48 hours, and number two, mostly focused on the severe weather threat. My perspective is a little broader. The difference is instead of serving a portion of the state, in fact, for you, you're doing what? Four states?
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I'm doing the entire state of Louisiana instead of just some section of the state, which I was doing as the chief meteorologist. But the other thing here is that I take more of a climatological perspective, a bigger picture look at the variability of weather over time. Sure, I do get involved when we've got portions of the state impacted or threatened by severe weather, but it's not the same type of thing. I'm not on air giving alerts, posting warnings, giving neighborhoods a heads up for what's coming. So I know what it is that you do, and it is definitely different what I'm doing now.
Where did the pressure, I'm just curious, the pressure for you as an on air meteorologist versus the pressure on you now as a state climatologist there? Do you feel more pressure nowadays than you did before? Because we know back when you're on television, you get pressure from whether it's management or the public as a whole. But this case here, what's it like for you?
Well, the pressure is different. Certainly, the pressure in TV, not only do you have that administrative pressure, the management pressure, but, and I assume you'll agree with this, the pressure in television was largely self imposed. It was about doing the very best I could in that 3 to 5 minute window or during periods of wall to wall weather to get the message out to my audience, to tell them clearly, succinctly, and without the hype or fear factor, here's what's coming, here's what you need to do. So I don't have that same kind of pressure with the public. Now the pressure, be honest, is more about balancing my role with the state along with at times sort of the perspective of weather and climate and how does that impact the state, how does that impact the state's economy, what is the political climate, if you will, about weather and climate. So it's a different kind of pressure, but I can honestly say I was prepared for it after Grymes 1.0, my 12 years as state climatologist back in the 90s. And I was ready for it then, and so I knew what I was stepping into here. So I will guarantee, I promise you that the pressure on TV is, at least for me, was far more difficult to manage at times.
You brought it up, so I'm going to ask you a little bit about that there. Not necessarily what your overall thoughts are there on it, because it's one of these things nowadays, too, like you just said. You mean, you are the state climatologist. You have to look at various things that are there. And I want to say the word, unfortunately, you have to take into consideration sometimes the political climate that is there also there with it as far as what you talk about and what you do. I'm just, from your perspective there on it, and I'll just give you my perspective. If I'm having a conversation with somebody and I just want to have a casual conversation, but then when I say the word climate, or then sometimes climate change, I'm like, gosh, Patrick, you got to make sure that you go and say, you're just talking about climate change in general. You're not talking about, which we see a lot of stories here, human-induced climate change there. I mean, is that a challenge there for you? Because you know, as a meteorologist, the weather goes in cycles. It is going to change there over a period of time there. And I guess part of it is, it's a challenge sometimes trying to explain that to people. And all you're simply talking about is, it's because weather goes in cycles and these things are bound to happen. Because I've seen it with snow events. Typically speaking, I see major snow events happen every 15 to 20 years. I mean, usually when they happen 2-3 years in a row. And
It can, yeah.
so again, I mean, do you see the same thing? And is that ever a challenge for you? I'm just curious.
Well, look, let's face it, you're sometimes walking a fine line because we seem to be, as a society, we've become awfully contrarian of late. Everything is black and white. And so the first thing to do, or I try and do, is establish with the person that I'm speaking with that an acknowledgement that the weather is not the same as it was 20, 30 years ago. And most people are willing to agree to that, especially when you start identifying some of these things. The fact that we're dealing with a more intense heat summer days, the fact that we do get these periodic winters that seem to be colder or snowier than others. And so the key really is to just get everyone to agree, step one, that the climate is variable. Let's not even worry about the cause. That's step one. Then step number two, and my approach has always been to ask the person that I'm talking with, do you think that when we go from a forest to a pasture to a Walmart parking lot, you've changed the environment? And everybody says yes. And what do you think has probably changed? Has it gotten warmer or cooler? Most people will say, oh, with a parking lot, it's probably warmer than it was back when it was a forest. Okay, there is an example of human induced climate change. The fact that we changed the landscape is a large contributor to local and regional climate change. And then I'll just leave it at that. So we don't have to go down the fossil fuel path. You've acknowledged the weather is variable, and I've just given you an example of very obvious human induced local regional climate change.
You basically have done the exact same thing that I've done with people. Is I use that exact same example, and then after that, I go and I end up saying, I've said after that, I'm not smart enough to figure out the rest of it. It's going to take years and years and years and years and years to figure out certain things there. I just say the bottom line is this: we have a responsibility for things there with it and doing it. But though the bigger same concept, like I say, Barksdale bubble, it probably goes and helps out with the temperature. After that, I'm like, I don't think so with it and doing it. But I have other explanations I give that we won't go and get into right now, just because of the length of our program here. But let me ask you just a few questions. Looking back as whenever you were on television, what was your biggest challenge sometime? And I give you this example here. Our biggest challenge sometimes is severe weather coverage and just how far you go with severe weather coverage. And that if you accidentally interrupt Final Jeopardy there with 2 minutes left in the program there to give a tornado warning. So I'm guessing now you're like, thank goodness I do not have to deal with that right now. Was that a challenge for you?
You're worried about Final Jeopardy? I was the CBS affiliate with LSU football.
Yeah, we've had that before, because we've had before that I can't remember what the date was with it, but we ended up having before we were airing. I think it was then during the NCAA basketball playoffs, and I think it was the Sweet 16, and we had Texas and LSU playing each other, and we had 2 to 3 minutes left in the game, and we had a classic supercell thunderstorm on top of downtown Shreveport. It produced softball size hail, but never produced a tornado. Now, I wasn't the one on the air that day, and thank goodness because of that. But though the meteorologist went on the air, and I cannot tell you from the local people that had sports shows and everything else, I don't want to call them death threats, because if they listen to this by chance, I don't want to do that. But they were hyped up big time there, with it. And it was after that, I think that led to eventually the transition where I became chief meteorologist. And then things changed up after that. And one of the things I said after that, and we didn't do it back in the day, I said, okay, first of all, if we have a sporting event on television, you guys need to start doing split screens. That is step number one there. And so we went and we ended up started doing that. It's weird, though. We got criticized for Final Jeopardy, but then it was just last week from this recording here. We had a tornado hit Southwest Shreveport. I was on the air at the time covering the entire thing going through. And the lady up at the front, she goes, Patrick, you know what? I didn't get a single phone call today. And I'm like, you didn't, because 2 reasons. One, that storm hit the hardest Shreveport. 2, I didn't cover up Jeopardy. So I think that might be the reason there for it.
Well, you've made a good decision there, and look, I get it absolutely, but here's the thing: in the end, and you and I both know this, what's more important, protecting lives and property, or seeing someone you don't know win $100,000? Um, it, I get it, and when it really gets to be a problem is, even if you've got the storm hammering Southwest Shreveport, you got people in the Northwest that might even be getting sunshine, and they just can be off the wall furious. But I still think we have to remember that our number one objective is to help the public make smart decisions. And unfortunately, since we can't geofence our telecast, there's no way that you can simply get that information just to the cluster that need it the most. So split screen is certainly one alternative that at least gets you halfway out of jail.
We're very fortunate here at our station. We actually have multitude of platforms. We have KTBS, we have KPXJCW, which is actually on all of the same platforms, and we also have a 24-hour weather channel, have a 24-hour news channel, and social media along those lines. So I've actually developed a concept where we can literally sit down in front of our computer and go Facebook Live and 24-hour weather channel all at the same time. But they also gave me the ability now, we used not to do this, is that I go on all platforms, and after 1 minute, I tell anybody on KTBS, if it's something big going on, I said, we're getting off of this, you come follow us everywhere else. So we've gone and done that there. Do you find, now you're state climatologist, you were having to deal with weather that's maritime weather there along the coast, hurricanes, all the way up to the northwest part of the state there, where it really majorly changes. Now, granted, I have to deal with an area that changes as well, but though I don't have to deal with quite so much the Gulf down there and dealing with that, I don't have to mess with that quite as much, even though we can get hurricanes up in our area. But has that been something? But I'm going to ask you the question. It's a challenge, but you've done this before, so you knew what you were getting into when you went back to doing it.
Well, I will say the job has changed substantially. When I was doing the state climate job in the 90s and early 2000, the office was wholly housed and operated at LSU. Now it is a state position. So my expectations are somewhat different. I mean, from the state climate perspective, from the, for lack of another term, from the state weather librarian perspective, it hasn't changed. But the connectivity and the expectations on me have changed considerably. Now, I want to make this clear. I mean, when we look at the state, we've got 4 National Weather Service offices that do local or county warning area services. Outside of television people like yourself, the professionals in the media, those are the regional experts. I don't sit back and look at ways to trump them or to beat them to the punch. I mean, that would be silly. It's me versus anywhere from 8 to 12 people in each of those 4 offices. There's no way I can compete with their knowledge base, their horsepower, or their 24-hour schedule. So I lean heavily on the Weather Service to help me make those kinds of decisions that you're talking about. There's no way I could track all of the details of the weather for 64 parishes. So my job is to get again, that sort of bigger picture perspective to give the governor's office and some of the state agencies a little bit of heads up as to what we think might be happening in a severe weather event, and also to provide some larger scale guidance. For example, things that people probably don't think about that much. I've spent a month tracking the Mississippi River because it was high. I've keeping my eyes on the tropics. We're getting ready for an active tropical season. So that's another layer there. It's more than just understanding the severe weather threat over the next 3 to 5 days. But my real position is not to get in the way of the Weather Service or in the way of people like you in the media. It's simply to augment and supplement it where it's asked or required of me, not necessarily to try and beat you to the punch. I can't do it. You know more about the Shreveport area than I do. There's no question about it. And particularly when it gets to the details of neighborhood by neighborhood impacts, there's no competition. That's your zone. But in terms of the bigger picture, and for example, telling people, say in the southeastern part of the state, to get ready for what's rolling into the northwest right now, that's where I can add a little bit beyond what you might normally do.
So I got one final topic here to wrap things up with you, and I hope maybe in the near future we'll do this again and we'll have a chance maybe to talk about the tropics and the
Great.
tropical outlook and the impacts on Louisiana and dealing with that. But you made a comment there with it, and you said like for us that we focus on dealing with what the weather is going to be the next 24 hours or the next 3 days or the next 5 days. That's a very interesting subject because I've had many conversations with the National Weather Service, who, by the way, I'm good friends with a lot of the meteorologists there. I have a group text message on my phone with them. Have known these folks for years. One of the meteorologists there, ironically enough, he went to school at what at the time was Northeast Louisiana University, and he came and did an internship underneath me when I was at KSLA. And then he went on to the Air Force, and now he works for the National Weather Service office there. But it's a challenge right now, and they find it a big challenge too. I find a challenge now, and I'm not a big fan of it to a degree. And you probably have had people that work for the state ask you questions about this stuff before. Is that they say to you, Jay, what's this deal with this weather here? Somebody on the internet's posted this meme here, and it shows that in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we're going to have the biggest outbreak of cold weather that we have ever had in our lives. And they show us this map here with the temperatures, which, by the way, all it was a 2-degree anomaly of the temperatures. It actually wasn't the temperatures. I talked to my friends at the Weather Service, and it's not just what I like to call wannabe social media meteorologists. There's actually some in the television profession doing this now. I, do you find that as a challenge that sometimes that's actually going to hurt getting the proper message out to the public sometimes? I'm scared of what that's going to be in the future.
Well, I'm not sure it can get a whole lot worse than it is right now. In fact, I think maybe we've seen a slight turn of the corner. There's been a couple of years where you call social meteorologists, or as Marshall's called them, atmospheric scientists. Um, yeah, these are people that are out to get clicks.
Mhm.
And so you find a nice graphic that is clickbait and you post it. Well, I think some people are getting a little tired of that. And I think more and more, and I'm assuming you're getting this because I was even seeing it before I'd left television. People, before they redistribute and take an image and make it go viral, they'll ask me, Jay, what do you think about this? And usually the first thing I'll do is circle the date. And yeah, it's 15 days out and it's one model. And has he shown you 3 of these in a row? Because what we'll often get are these perturbations in the models that nothing, nothing. Oh, there's a storm. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And so the key is, and people are becoming, in the beginning, they were just looking at this stuff and going, oh my God. Now they're becoming a little bit more savvy. That's going to take a while. But I would argue that maybe, especially with people like you, that instead of banging your head against the wall and saying, oh no, they're at it again, what we have to try and do is kind of say, okay, let me talk people off of the roof on this one and explain to them things like there's not been any persistence in the model in its multiple runs. Uh, Sometimes it's just as easy to say, I'm lucky if I get it right out 5 days. You're looking at a model that's 15
Well,
days out.
that's exactly what I do. I said, I say, you're asking me about a forecast model that's 10, 15, 20 days out. You don't even believe me what it's going to be tomorrow. And
Right.
so that's how I joke with them about
Yeah.
it. And I'll admit, I've gotten blocked on some of those websites before because I've called them out. And it's one of those things there. But I just don't think it's fair to the public. But what you said is what I exactly say. We look for model consistency, model
Right.
run to model run to model run, but also like the GFS, for example. I like model run consistency with the 0Z and the 12Z. The 18Z and the 6Z don't seem to have the same consistency with. I've had conversations before with the Weather Service. But then my next thing is I tell people, look, we can give you the broad picture of things, but once we get within 3 days of it, we then start to get to the short-term models, which are much, much better at doing stuff. But I think, and then the funny thing is that if it doesn't work out, that people will say, well, it's better to be safe than sorry. No, it's better to be responsible, in my opinion, there with it. But I just think that's just one of the things. And I mean, I hope you're right. But man, I think they get a lot of the clicks and all during the winter because that's what gets people excited about the stuff.
Well, it does, but and you may not see as much as we do, but down here in South Louisiana, any tropical development gets the viral connection. But people are beginning to get it that, wait a minute, okay, he just showed me this and he hasn't showed me another one. So it tells them that, okay, there's no model run to model run consistency. The other thing I will often tell them, yeah, I mean, we can joke about it. I've done what you do. I can't get 3 days right, and now you're asking me about 3 weeks. But the other thing is, I will just look them square in the eye and say, if I really thought it was something to worry about, I promise you I would let you know. And, someone like you that's got years of experience and recognition in the community, and I was lucky. I was in the Baton Rouge community on television for almost 30 years. So I'd reached that place where people kind of knew if Jay doesn't seem to be worried about it, I'm not going to get worried about it either. And all I do is give them that measure of comfort. That is, right now, I don't see it as a problem, but I promise you, I'm keeping an eye on it. But anything that far out is just a guidance at best and not something for you to start getting too concerned about. So and I do think that the audience is becoming slightly more savvy and beginning to say, okay, wait a minute. Is this just another one of those clickbait things? And when you get these guys blocking you, there's your sign that, okay, you caught them with their pants down.
Blocking me or sending me threatening emails after that to report me for some strange reason, and so I decided I'm gonna leave that person alone.
Yeah.
It's not worth it there. Jay, hopefully we'll have a chance to have some more conversations within the
Would love to do
very
it.
near future to talk about various aspects of climate in Louisiana, the hurricane season, because I'm assuming that is something you all are really ramping up for, because you have to make sure you give the proper information that is out there, because you are the connection, really and truly, I'm guessing, between the government and them perhaps in their allocating resources to places, and you got to give them the best information, I'm guessing.
Well, again, I work hand in hand with the National Hurricane Center, and the local NWS offices. And again, I want to make it clear that those are the experts. Those are your government specialists. But I do have some experience about the impacts and the relationship of tropical weather with Louisiana that someone in Miami's just not going to have, no matter how long they've been doing it there. But one of the things that I've really been driving home is, for whatever reason, Mother Nature seems to be very angry with Louisiana, because these last 20, 25 years have been the most active 25 years on the record books in terms of tropical impacts. And so, whether that's a phase that we're going to cycle out of or whether that's a new norm, I don't have the answer there. But the reality is that we need to be prepared. And in fact, I would say there's better than a 50-50 chance that we'll be impacted by at least one named storm this season.
And wrapping it up here, and like I tell people too, is that a lot of people, when they put out their hurricane forecast, and they may call for an above average year, they may call for a below average year. In my opinion, none of that matters, because why is that? Is that if it's a below average year and you have one storm hit your coastline, it's significant. If it's an above average year and you have 25 named storms and nothing hits your coastline, you're never going to think a thing about it. So it's what's happening at that given time there, with it. It's going to be interesting to see how things are going to turn out. And maybe we'll have a conversation sometime or another also about last year with Beryl, which was so unique of a storm that I never want to have to go and live through anything like that ever again. And doing it there, that hit the Texas coastline, but right through the heart of the Arklatex. I want to say the most number of tornadoes in a 24-hour period that we've ever seen. The original one was the Easter outbreak in 2000 that we saw, where we had, I forgot how many, 20-plus tornado touchdowns. This was 40-plus tornado touchdowns from supercell storms associated with a hurricane. And that in and of itself is odd as can be. So anyway, yeah,
it's just an example of what can happen even with a storm that doesn't make landfall in the state.
Yeah. Okay, Jay, we appreciate it and everything. Hopefully we'll have you on another edition of the Barksdale Bubble very, very soon, sir.
All right, appreciate it. And now I know what the Barksdale Bubble is.
There you go. Go look it up.